we're giving Israel tons of military aid is one that many American citizens are really bewildered about, especially during this time, as you point out, of an economic slump in this country when we don't have our own jobs, schools are being decimated, as are all social services. So it's a very good question, and I think some of the reasons are, of course, the very strong Israel lobby that operates in Congress to secure as much aid as possible. And even though you have to understand that us providing military aid to Israel is against our own law, there are two laws, the export law, that prevent us from providing military aid to countries that are using our weapons or the money for offensive purposes. So this military aid is against American law as well. I think we have to understand that. I think the other thing that is important is that the defense industry is very much tied into continuing aid all around the world, wherever it can, for military supplies, especially as we may be winding down from Iraq and Afghanistan. These defense contractors need to find other places, and Israel is one that has not only its own arms industry, which is extremely important because then they export stuff around the world, and some of our aid then supports their own military industry, and that's very unlike any other kind of aid. Usually military aid needs to be spent in the United States, but in the case of Israel, there's a special provision that a third of it can be spent on Israeli arms companies. And then what they do with that is that they use those weapons in Gaza and in the West Bank and then market them as having been battlefield tested. So it's this horrible economic cycle.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Monday, May 14th, 2012, and I'm Darko. This is my website, ggnonline.com. Also on YouTube, ddarko2012, and my backup channel is ddarko2013 if you'd like to subscribe. All the headlines and links will be posted in YouTube's video description. So, that first video obviously was about Israel, basically U.S. supporting Israel. I'll get into that later. But the second one was some raw video footage from the AP of sectarian gun fights in Lebanon, killing civilians. So, just a follow-up to this, because we're going to cover the Middle East, basically Syria, Lebanon, Al-Qaeda, and how the U.S. is funding Al-Qaeda. Just more evidence just keeps coming out. It says here, 2 killed, several wounded in clashes in Lebanon's Tripoli. 2 people, a little typo there, but 2 people have been killed and several others have been injured in clashes between supporters and opponents of the Syrian government in the Lebanese city of Tripoli, a security official says. So, Yemen's also heating up. I'll get into that as well, but remember I just covered about basically the Syrian war being talked about as a U.S., Israeli, Saudi conspiracy to overthrow Assad, and that was in 2007 by Seymour Hersh's article in the New Yorker. But when you go down and you actually read into it, it says here that that the article also describes in great detail the role of the Harri faction, or Harri, in Lebanon, working closely with the Saudis and Americans, and their role in creating a safe haven for terrorist organizations on Lebanese soil, now involved fully in destabilizing neighboring Syria. It says here that many analysts have treated the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and their involvement in Syria's uprising as a somewhat nebulous phenomenon, But the New Yorker's 2007 article makes it clear that the Muslim Brotherhood is one of the primary instruments used by the Saudis as part of a U.S.-Israeli-Saudi effort to eliminate Syria and Iran. Not only that, but the report indicates that the United States itself has been funding and using the Muslim Brotherhood as well. So this little standoff in Lebanon says here fighting between the supporters of Damascus and its opponents who came from the nearby neighborhood erupted on May 12th as anti-Damascus demonstrators, that's basically the Western Fund rebels, tried to approach the offices of the pro-government Syrian Social Nationalist Party in Tripoli. And lastly, on Sunday, 3 people, including a Lebanese soldier, were also killed as a result of the clashes between the two rival groups. Okay, so moving on here, Syrian activists say 23 soldiers killed in fighting. So the Syrian activists, which are the rebels, which are the terrorists, say rebels killed 23 soldiers in battles near the flashpoint city of Homs, one of the deadliest days for the Syrian forces in 14-month anti-government uprising. So it's kind of weird that they separate it and saying the Syrian activists say that the rebels, well, I thought the Syrian activists, isn't it weird though? I mean, we all know this, the Syrian activists became the rebels. They became armed by the West. So, you know, just to kind of cut through the crap there, Syria says U.S. allied to terrorists in country. So this is via Reuters. Syria accused the United States and Western countries on Saturday of colluding with Al-Qaeda-linked militants to target the country in the wake of a string of explosions in Damascus and Aleppo. The government has blamed on foreign-backed fighters. Yes, this is the suicide bombers. Which are basically what? Al-Qaeda, I believe it was, took credit, and we know that Al-Qaeda is basically backed by the CIA and the Mossad. So Western countries and the U.S., which made alliances to wage wars using the pretext of fighting terrorism, are now making allegiances with the terrorists, which Syria has been facing, the minister told journalists in Damascus on Saturday. He went on to be quoted as saying that along with Al-Qaeda and the international Western countries that support them with weapons and money. So the opposition, of course, denies any role of the attacks and has argued that the government is behind the bombings. So the government's behind the bombings. Moscow opposes plans to train Syrian militants in Kosovo. This is via Interfax from May 14th. The Russian Foreign Ministry is concerned by the reports that the Syrian militants will be trained in Kosovo and has urged the international community to prevent that from happening. And finishing up with this article, such intentions raise concerns because they run counter to the efforts of the United Nations Arab League Special Envoy Kofi Annan's plan by the international community. And another thing that I found that would run counter to the efforts of the United Nations peace plan is what? Is Al-Qaeda sitting there along with the UN peacekeepers. So it says here, Getty Images, a man wearing a black shirt bearing an Al-Qaeda flag left speaks with a UN observer as monitors meet with the rebels, which is Al-Qaeda, and civilians in the village of Azara in the province of Homs on May 4th, 2012. So we know that the Muslim Brotherhood is one of the primary instruments used by the Saudis, but it's also what? Being funded by the United States. So when you see this article, it makes sense. Syria's Muslim Brotherhood is gaining influence over anti-Assad revolt. So it goes on here and it says, after 3 decades of persecution that virtually eradicated its presence, the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood, backed by the Saudis and the United States, has resurrected itself to become the dominant group in the fragmented opposition movement, along with Al-Qaeda, pursuing a 14-month uprising or regime change takeover of President Bashar al-Assad's Syria. This also makes sense that the Brotherhood is also moving on its own to send funding weapons to the rebels, which are Al-Qaeda, which are already being funded by the West. So the West is funding Muslim Brotherhood. It's going through there. It's going through there. So, you know, I don't think I need to really say any more about that. Thousands remain in secret Libya prisons, says the United Nations. So this is what's going to happen to Syria. About 4,000 people are still being held in militia detention centers in Libya, often secret, and many are tortured. So this is, of course, and there's serious obstacles, right? Well, one of the obstacles is they put what? They put extremists in power there in Libya. So, yeah, they were hanging a little flag, Al-Qaeda flag there as well. They want to institute Sharia law, like I mentioned before. I don't think they've actually done it, but either way, all these people have been locked up, these dissenters, and that's what they're going to do in Syria. And a lot of people still support al-Assad, so it's not like, you know, we're talking about Hitler here. There's a lot of normal people that support this guy. And I just remember, let's not forget about those mass graves. They kept saying it was Gaddafi, but when it came out later, it was mostly the, quote, rebels, right? Al-Qaeda and that said they were leading up the charge in Libya, that were responsible for those mass graves of people, especially the black population. They were targeting them. So it says here, U.S. drone strikes kill 10 suspected militants in Yemen. So this is from May 12th from Reuters. 2 apparent U.S. drone strikes killed at least 10 suspected Al-Qaeda, which is, of course, Western-backed linked militants in Yemen on Saturday. I don't think that these guys are even Al-Qaeda. These guys are someone else. I remember reading this in an All-Africa article. It's a certain tribe, so they keep saying Al-Qaeda. It says here, at least 42 killed in army offensive in southern Yemen. Obama aid in Sana'a to assure deeper U.S. involvement. So see, this helps, just like Afghanistan, it helps establish or keep U.S. presence, Western presence. So 42 people, including 12 members of Yemen's military, were killed today in an attack by the military of the town. So that's always a good way to rally people around to fight this war on terror. You just got to sacrifice a few of your own, though. And just so you know, the U.S. has deployed special forces nominally as trainers to support the Yemenis military in ongoing fighting. They've also sent them lots of aid, like I've mentioned before, just more recently. But they deny plans to put boots on the ground. That's right, because they'll just drone bomb them to the Stone Age. Postal worker says he was poised because it's good for the military-industrial complex, like we saw in the earlier videos. Postal worker says he was poisoned by mysterious leaking parcel from Yemen. Ooh, so just like the other underwear bomber, now we got another piece of mail with some toxic stuff in there, but officials deny it ever existed. So again, another false flag, intelligence-run operation here. So this occurred on February 2nd, 2011, and now it's in the news. Why do you think it's in the news, right? It's like the other article with Yemen in the mainstream media about what? Oh, there's malnutrition in Yemen. So I said what? I said that be ready for drone strikes, and now here they are, right? And they aid what? They give aid to Yemen, the Yemeni government, to fight the terrorists, but what? Oh, a lot of that money gets funneled to Al-Qaeda. How convenient. So next up, creator of new underwear bomb uncovered by double agent must be killed, Senator Feinstein. So they gotta see, just like Anwar al-Awlaki, basically the Yemeni, American-born Yemeni, who was killed by a drone strike, first American killed. What? They want to cover evidence, because he was kind of like an asset for them, for the CIA. So they killed him. Now this guy, this undercover double agent, must be killed. This Patsy. So many of you are aware that Israel is exporting arms to Azerbaijan, but they're also exporting foods that are causing their men to become infertile. So NATO is a step closer to getting out of the Afghan war. But the United States never wants to leave that place or hand it over to China or Russia. So that's why you see stuff in the media about the peeing on the Quran. That's why you see stories about, a suicide bomber that was an Afghan soldier, a double agent working for the CIA, blowing up American soldiers. And you see stuff like this. Senior Afghan peace negotiator shot dead in Kabul. So the Taliban denied involvement, and others are involved in this, they said. Then we have this. House passes Enhanced Israeli Cooperation Bill, bipartisan legislation that reaffirms and enhances U.S. policy commitments to Israeli security. This is from May 10th. Then we have this. Panetta Barak to announce more U.S. military aid to Israel, special package of $680 million to be announced in D.C. So next up, Gulf leaders to discuss Bahrain-Saudi union. That's kind of a big deal. Remember, Lebanon was designated as a staging ground to destabilize Syria with Sunni extremists. U.S. intelligence knew in advance that unleashing these Sunni extremists would result in genocide, and Saudis and Americans admit Sunni extremists are under their control. Unlike most other Gulf countries ruled by Sunni dynasties, Bahrain was hit last year by a wave of protests inspired by the Arab Spring, led by a Shiite majority, and that's why nothing happened, right? Nothing happened. They were fired on with live rounds. No one talked about peace or human rights. Colin Powell says U.S. was set for war with Iraq before his UN speech even took place. Crossword writer accused of hiding coded murder message on Chavez. This guy's probably getting some weaponized cancer here. Hugo Chavez ends successful cancer treatment in Cuba. Kind of like Russell Means with his little tongue or throat cancer. California large search for FBI agent who worked in national security affairs. So authorities are saying this guy's, quote, suicidal, and the prime reason for the amount of resources, hundreds of FBI agents, is the concern that, oh, he has a weapon, not that he's a whistleblower, possibly. Umbrella stab victim dies of mercury poison. An Italian anarchist takes credit for killing a nuclear senior executive. So they're going to boost security for these anarchists and even put boots on the ground.